I so wanted to be a writer. And then I had Scholastic saying, well, you are, like you're writing.
You got to believe in yourself and recognize this is just the beginning. Keep going. There's something else always right around the corner.
Welcome to Hall Pass. You're listening to the official podcast of the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, presented by the Alliance for Young Artists and Writers. This show will encompass a series of interviews about how art, writing, and creativity have shaped the lives and careers of Scholastic Art and Writing Awards alumni. So, sit back, relax, and let's get inspired. Writers, artists, supporters of writers and artists, welcome back to the Hall Pass podcast. I'm so excited to share today's episode with you. This is the kind of show you're going to want to listen to when you're in a creative rut and you want to remember why it is that you love your art. I had the pleasure of chatting with creatives who amplify the importance of writing across genres. You know, social media makes us feel like we need to brand ourselves with one specific type of niche or one specific type of art, but let this episode be a reminder for you to keep experimenting and playing, because it's never too late and you're never too old or too young to try your hand at a new medium. Before we jump into the interviews, we have our quote of the day from one of our notable Scholastic Awards alumni. This one's from Andy Warhol, best known for his silkscreen paintings. But his work has ranged from visual art to directing films to photography, and he really just is the perfect person to kick off this episode. He says, "Don't think about making art, just get it done. Let everyone else decide if it's good or bad, whether they love it or hate it. While they are deciding, make even more art." I love this quote because it highlights the importance of creating art for you instead of focusing on what others want to see from you. And just the fact that the more specific and true you are to your experience, the more that will reflect in your art and resonate and relate to others who are experiencing the same thing. Our first guest today won a Scholastic Award in 1990 for nonfiction writing before becoming a feminist performance artist and writer. Today, she teaches in the MFA program in creative writing and the BFA program in critical studies courses at CalArts and has premiered 50 original performance artworks around the world. Her memoir in performance art, Swallow the Fish, was named by Entropy a Best Nonfiction Book of 2017, and her writing has appeared in numerous publications, such as Art 21 and Obsidian. Please welcome Gabrielle Civil.
So I'm a Black feminist performance artist, poet, and writer. And I'm lucky enough, actually, to profess all of those values and those things as a professor at the California Institute of the Arts. I teach in the MFA program in creative writing, and I also teach Black feminism, art and activism, and translation sort of studies in the critical studies program there for undergraduate students as well.
So cool. So for someone who maybe doesn't know what performance art is, could you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Ooh, performance art is my favorite thing. Performance art, at least the way that I do it, consists of entering into a space or creating a space and then making something happen with my voice, with my body, with my words, with installations, and sometimes with other people.
Could you tell us, how did you get to performance art? I mean, that's really unique, such a unique type of art. How did you get interested in that?
I came to performance art, wildly enough, through poetry. I mean, I was trained as a poet. I love poetry so much. I love writing of all kinds. I love art of all kinds. But I was specifically interested in thinking about ways of circulating poetry outside of just the traditional poetry reading. So that took me into slam poetry and spoken word. And then, I mean, and those forms are also great, but can there be even another way of circulating language that is more original or maybe more distinct to my own process? And so I started doing conceptual art projects, and I started to, with a collective of friends called the Number One Gold Collective, we would like write things and slip them into books. We did these infiltration projects. We folded, over what was it, over 10,000 poems in gold foil and circulated them all around New York City. I mean, we just did all these things. And increasingly, I started being interested in sort of writing poetry as art and art making. And so I was doing a bunch of projects, and then those projects, I started to recognize, like, wait a minute, where is my body? Where is my body in all of this? There's all this language. Now I'm out in the world, but something is missing. And so then I started to engage in dance and in movement. And so performance art for me is a way to bring all those different elements together.
I love that so much. I come from both a theater background and a writing background, so I have always just loved the way that those two fields kind of connect, and the way you embody characters is so similar. So that's really fascinating. So clearly you have been interested in writing from a very early age, as seen by the Scholastic Awards. Was there something about your childhood or your family that maybe drew you to this artistic path?
Well, I'm very, very lucky in that I grew up with just like within a family of readers. I grew up with books everywhere around me. Both of my parents, they're both retired now, but they both were teachers, and my mom ended up being a principal, and so of an elementary school. So there was always a great value around reading. And although I was the more kind of poetry, creative writing reader, and my sister became a doctor, my mom was more science oriented. Still, there was just a lot of love for language. I also think the fact that my father is from Haiti, so I have one immigrant parent. My mother's African American and my father's Haitian. We were always, like, playing with language in the house. There was French and there was Spanish and there was Haitian Creole, and we would tease each other. And I think that also contributed to my desire to be a writer. I always wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to be glamorous. And those things all seemed wrapped up together to me when I was a kid.
Definitely. I think like the number one way to pique a child's interest is to be surrounded by readers, and just to gain that natural curiosity is so valuable. So
Absolutely.
Taking it back, could you tell me what you remember from winning the award? Like, how did that feel as a young person to be recognized for your voice, and how did that kind of impact your career moving forward?
So I have some of the most wonderful memories of the whole Scholastic process. Although the thing I don't fully remember is exactly what year it was. It was either maybe I won, and I didn't like win either. I think I got like an honorable mention, a national honorable mention in essay, nonfiction, which I'll tell you, that's kind of funny because I was thinking I was going to be a novelist, or I was going to write stories, but I was actually writing about my life, which in the end, the books that I have right now are about my life. So it ended up kind of prefiguring that. But I ended up applying because I had a wonderful high school teacher who really encouraged all of us to apply. And I was so thrilled to be invited to this national sort of ceremony. It was at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City, which seemed so glamorous, and where all of these writers that I had heard about from the 1920s had come and had hung out there. I couldn't believe it. And my family, it was going to be tricky for me to afford to go to this ceremony because I didn't live in New York. So my high school teacher said, oh, well, you know what? I have a friend who lives in New York City, so maybe you can go and stay there. It was like the community came together for me to be able to be a part of the Scholastic experience.
Yeah.
And at the time, another high school teacher there, the teacher that encouraged me, her name is Kay Hughes. The other English teacher, Barbara Jones, her brother, Lawrence Joseph, is a poet. And so she said, well, you know what? I will chaperone you there, and then I'll stay with my brother. He was the first, living poet I had ever met, Lawrence. So it was all wrapped up in this idea of like, whoa, there are people who are alive. I mean, back then too, there wasn't the internet in the same way. So the way that I knew writers, they were dead. Do you know what I mean? It was all these like dead white men or something. here was this guy. He wasn't white. He wasn't dead. He was a poet. He was living in New York City. I mean, the whole thing was so amazing. And when I walked into that ceremony and we were in that hotel and there were all of these teenagers, all these kids who were the same age, and we were all writers, I felt like I was in heaven. Like I felt like I had made it. It was such a powerful experience. I loved it so much.
That is so meaningful and such a testament to how important it is to raise the next generation of artists and writers. That's how they're created. And clearly you are a professor now, so you are with a lot of young artists and writers a lot. So for that teenager out there listening who is kind of on the fence about the awards, maybe they're afraid to get their voice out there for the first time, what would you say to those teens about entering the awards?
You got to do it. You just have to do it. You have to put yourself out there. I ended up getting a trip to New York City. I met this amazing poet. I got to go to this awesome ceremony. And I also got to take myself very seriously. And I saw that other people took me seriously, that other people believed in me, people that I didn't even know here at the Scholastic, Award Center, that the judges, that these other people, you can't get anywhere if you don't put yourself out there. You got to try, you got to do it.
So because you entered with nonfiction and you write about your life, I'm really curious about, the vulnerability that you have through storytelling. How did you not get past it, but kind of embrace vulnerability in your work?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. In fact, just before this conversation we're having now, I was just talking to my editor. We're in production for my latest book, and it has all of these things about romantic relationships and travel and maybe things I didn't do completely right. And it feels so vulnerable to put that out there. And it also feels so urgent and so necessary to put that out there. No risk, no reward. Mm-hmm. In terms of writing, in order for things to have resonance, they have to have depth, and there has to be some element of risk, I think. I mean, back up. There's different kinds of writing. I read everything. There are some things that are just completely escapist, some things that are just for pleasure. That's awesome. But if you're really serious about revealing something, if you're really serious about crafting something in language and also crafting something through emotion and emotional revelation, you have to be vulnerable. You have to get real with yourself. Although I teach a class actually at CalArts called Juicy Memoir, where it's all about life writing. But the thing I always say, which I got from my mentor, one of my mentors, Omi Oshu and Joni L. Jones, don't take yourself to a place that you can't take yourself back from. So you do have to be mindful of your own kind of issues, boundaries, concerns, healthiness, but also that's how you learn. That's how you grow, by writing into and through. And in art making, by taking the risk, trying something, doing something, which means that you might fail, but that's the only way to move forward, by trying.
Absolutely. I mean, that's motivating for me, so I can only imagine how motivating that is for teens and everybody listening. So thank you so much for sharing that. So what is your creative process like?
So I'm a person that always keeps a notebook, and I'm a scribbler. And that's just a way kind of staying in practice, but I don't put a lot of pressure on what that scribbling is. It's just a way to always be dipping in and through language. But the work that I make, performance and writing are very deeply intertwined. And so increasingly, people invite me to come and make something or do something in a place. And I find myself generating writing as a way to flesh out that idea or deliver something or offer something in live performance. And then I kind of transcribe whatever it is that I made or did, and then I start to play with that. And maybe there are poems that come from that, or reflections or essays that come from that. So writing and performance are together a big part of my process of producing work.
So one more question before we wrap up this little segment and move on. If you could go back in time and tell yourself, your teen writer self, some words of wisdom, what would you say?
I would say to that ambitious little kiddo, this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. Keep going. Believe in yourself. That sounds so hokey, but you got to really, if you are going to be an artist in any way, shape, or form, and that includes being an artist of life, it isn't always about being published. It isn't always about getting the exhibition or the grant or the job or whatever. It's about how you live your life. You got to believe in yourself and recognize this is just the beginning. Keep going. There's something else always right around the corner.
I love that. And I can see through your words what an amazing professor you are, because it's so encouraging.
Thank you. That's kind of you to say.
Get ready for Hot Seat. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Both.
No sleep.
Right. Right.
Do you like to work at a coffee shop, at a library, or at home?
At home in my bed.
Poetry or novels?
Poetry.
Comedy.
But also both. But
Both.
if I have to pick, we got to go poetry. Yeah.
Comedy or drama?
Drama.
If you could have dinner with any famous writer, dead or alive, who would you choose?
Ooh. I mean, I gotta say Toni Morrison. I think I just have to. Yeah.
Introvert or extrovert?
Extrovert.
Do you listen to music while you write, or do you prefer silence?
Depends. Oft if it's a first draft of something, silence. If I'm revising, sometimes music helps.
Favorite book, either of the moment or of all time?
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness gracious. That's what kind of question? Wow. I'm going to go with Maud Martha by Gwendolyn Brooks, which is not a very well-known book. So I'm going to say it so that other people will be like, what's that book? But it's the only novel by the first Black woman to win the Pulitzer Prize in poetry. Perfect. So that's like my poetry novel together.
See, that's why I asked the question, because we need to know what the books are out there.
So good, and it's not that long, people. It's just amazing. You got to read it. Nice. Okay.
What are you currently working on right now?
I am in the production of my 5th book, In and Out of Place, which is a performance memoir about a wonderful time in my life when I went and lived in Mexico City and made a bunch of performance art and had a lot of adventures.
Awesome. And last question, where can our audience find you? Are you on Instagram? Do you have a website? Anything like that?
Yeah, I do have a website, although we're overhauling it, but I have it, and soon it'll even be more awesome. Gabrielle Civil artist.com. And then I am on Instagram at Gabrielle, I think it's _ Civil, Civil. So yeah, those are some ways to find me.
Awesome. Well, Gabrielle, thank you so much for being here today. This has been such an amazing and motivating conversation. And I'm so excited for everyone to listen to this and get motivated. And I'm ready to go finish my novel after this conversation. So
go do it. We need to read your novel. We need to read your novel. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for continuing to support teen writers and teen artists through Scholastic.
This next conversation is for you aspiring authors, so don't go anywhere. This guest won a gold medal in 2003 for writing her collection of poetry, flash fiction, and nonfiction. She then went on to publish 2 collections of poetry and a variety of young adult novels spread across multiple genres such as historical fiction, fantasy, thriller, and more. Her newest book, Sunrise Nights, in collaboration with Jeff Zentner, is on sale July 9th and will be linked in our show notes. This is Brittany Cavallaro.
I was a pretty serious writer starting in high school, and I was like full speed ahead to become a poet. That was my goal. So I was taking a lot of poetry classes. I was writing a lot of poems. And then I kept ending up in this situation where I would go to study poetry and then like there would be a sudden roadblock. So when I went to undergrad, the poetry teacher went on sabbatical for a year and I was like, oh, this is fine. I'll just, I'll take some fiction classes and I'll just like hang out and wait for him to get back. And I liked those a lot, but I was like, no, I'm a poet. And, I went on and I did my master's in poetry, and they needed an additional person to take the fiction workshops for them to fill. And I was like, well, I have some experience doing this, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. That's fine. And then I got to my PhD in creative writing. which I did in poetry.
Wow.
And it was sort of like I woke up in my second year and I just sneezed out a novel. It was like a sneeze that had been building for like
Wow.
7 years.
Uh-huh.
And so I was 25 and I finished a draft of a book that will never see the light of day. It
Uh-huh.
was my starter novel. It was my
Yep.
training wheels novel. I quickly started working on, after that, the book that would become A Study in Charlotte, which was my first young adult novel. And I was lucky enough to be teaching detective fiction at the time at the University of Wisconsin and was talking about detective fiction, eating and breathing it,
Uh-huh.
alongside all the poetry. So that was sort of what, got me started. And I do publish collections of poetry and I do
Uh-huh.
teach poetry, but this has been like sort of a delightful detour that sort of also became like the main highway in my
Yeah.
career. So that's how I got started.
Oh, that is like the best part about college, that you could just stumble into a class you weren't planning on taking and the entire rest of your career kind of changes or adapts to that. I love that story so much. And I'm particularly excited to talk to you because of how you have written in so many different genres. You've basically done it all for the most part. What is that like for you? How do you put on those different hats of like what genre you're working in one time versus the next? Do you have a favorite genre?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really lucky in that I went to an arts high school, Interlochen Arts Academy, the one I teach at now. And one of the things they really emphasized was this kind of multidisciplinary writing. And the idea is that, learning how to craft a poem is only going to help your fiction writing. And learning what a
Mhm.
story is or a narrative arc is only going to help you work against that a little bit in
Right.
poetry, right? So I think it's really informative. Of course, like everybody, I decided that I was like one specific thing coming
Hmm.
out of
Hmm.
that, but it really did serve me well as I kept going. In terms of what's my favorite, it's funny. I feel like I really, especially now that I've been in my 30s, it's sort of like I go through different seasons
Yeah.
in
Hmm.
my life. Poems for me sort of arrive. It's not like I get struck by like a bolt of inspiration, but
Hmm.
something will happen. Like I'll tell you a story. So last year on my drive to work, it was October, and I kept driving by this dentist's office, and it looked like the dentist, like they had set up like this very elaborate Halloween display in the front lawn. And there were what looked to me like a number of teeth that they had like set up coming out of the ground. And I was like, okay, the first time I saw it, I was like, that's weird. The
Hmm.
second time I saw that, I was like, there's something interesting about this. And then the third time I like pulled over
Uh-huh.
and went to like investigate. And it turned out they weren't teeth, they were just gravestones. But that image for Halloween, gravestones for Halloween,
Right.
not actual gravestones,
Yes, yes,
inflatable.
yes.
But I remember that image just stuck with me, and I wrote down a brief description of it in my notes app. And then I sort of hang out and wait for another image or another phrase to attach itself to
Mm.
that.
Hmm.
Um, and in my head, that sort of fell under the category of like weird human behavior,
Yeah.
right? And then I remember I was driving by a golf course in like sleet, just the worst weather conditions. And there were all these people out on the golf course wearing like full body protective gear golfing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that seemed like that sort of belonged in the same place. And so when I'm writing a
Yeah.
poem, it's
Oh.
like at a cruise, um, and
Honestly,
then
that's not too different from novel writing, too. It's like you're going
yeah,
about your day and you see something that inspires you and you need to write it down or something. That's really
yeah,
lovely.
absolutely. And in poetry, it's sort of like I like seeing that quick connection,
Yeah.
and then I have to jump on it
Yeah.
and draft it, and then I can keep working on it. With novel writing, it's more like I have an idea in 2015, and then 2% of my brain thinks about it for the next 2 years, and then 5% of my brain thinks about it for the 2 years after that. And it
Yes.
has to hang out and wait until it's like totally undeniable. Uh,
100%. You need to be like obsessed with that idea for a number of years. Like
Yeah,
it's a
exactly. And I
commitment.
have ideas that just like disappear, right? And those
Totally.
were not worth it anyway. So it's like I'm playing the long game and the short game at the same time. And so
Yeah.
poetry and fiction really sit really comfortably with each other in that way for
100%.
me.
So, taking it back to your awards, your Scholastic Awards journey, could you walk me through what that experience was like, winning the award, the emotions behind winning, and everything you felt at that time, and how it maybe impacted your confidence as a writer?
Yeah, absolutely. Sending my work out to the Scholastic Awards was really the first time that I had sent it out to be seen. My teachers had seen it and maybe some of my friends, but I remember feeling so nervous um, putting together. I think I remember it was we printed it all back then, like
Uh-huh.
stuffing my manila envelope full of work and just thinking like, yeah, you get a little bit scared because it feels so
Sure.
personal and you've worked so hard on it. But I, had wonderful advice from my teachers to just send it off and not think about it.
Hmm.
And I remember my junior year of high school receiving some recognition
Hmm.
for some poems, and that giving me the confidence to put together a senior portfolio for the
Uh-huh.
Gold Portfolio
Yeah.
Awards. And it had fiction in it and it had poetry in it. I think it had some short nonfiction. It was work that I had been writing that I had been working on for a really long time.
Uh-huh.
So there wasn't anything brand new. I had like sort of obsessed over it and revised it and cleaned it up. And I remember getting that phone call that I had won the Gold Portfolio Award and just like sort of not believing it. It was like being seen.
Hmm.
And it was like this very secret thing that I had wanted for myself for so long. I so wanted to be a writer. And then I had Scholastic saying, well, you are,
Hmm.
like you're writing. And so I went to New York with my parents. We saw a Broadway show, which was amazing.
Amazing.
We
Amazing.
went to the award ceremony in Carnegie Hall. I remember that Edie Falco was there, and that was like Sopranos time, and my family's Italian, so that was a very big deal that Edie Falco was there. They had us pass the mic down the front row to read a little bit from our writer's statement.
Hmm.
And I found out we were going to do that. I'm sure they had told us, and I had just like missed it, but I found out it landed that I was going to be doing that like maybe 10 minutes before. And I was like, okay, you can't cry. You can't like, your voice can't shake. Like you have to sound like really professional. It's like box breathing at the
Uh-huh.
beginning of the awards. But I got through it and made a bunch of new friends. And, it was just magical.
Oh, yeah, that moment of recognition as a young writer is so crucial for your continuing process as knowing you want to study writing and all of that. So, I'm curious to know what drew you to writing at such a young age, especially to take it so seriously. Was there anyone who kind of inspired your love for reading and writing?
Yeah, my parents were so, so supportive. They, my husband says they describe buying books for me when I was a kid like I was like a coal fire in a train, and they were just like shoveling books in as quickly as they could.
Amazing. That's a
And
great habit to have.
yeah, absolutely. I was so lucky that they were supportive. And, I think most people when their kid is like, oh, I want to be a poet. It takes some people by surprise, but my parents were
Totally.
just like, that sounds great. You should do that, which is wonderful. And so I was lucky to have their support. But also my great uncle, his given name is Mort Castle. So I'm pretty sure the only thing that he could ever do is the thing he ended up doing, which is being a horror writer.
No, for sure.
And yeah, and he was the one who really encouraged me to do things like apply to contests and think about going to an arts boarding school. And he was really the one who found a lot of that information for me and was just a big supporter. So I really appreciate that too.
What is your creative process like? So this is the famous writer's question. Are you a plotter or a pantser? Or as I like to say, a plantser, which is like, do you have an outline? Do you write at the seat of your pants? What is that process like for you?
Yeah, when I'm working on a novel, it really depends. So I have 6 books that I wrote in 2 different series. And so after that first book, what you're really doing is you're sort of picking up strands from the previous books and weaving those into new stories
Right.
so they feel continuous. But when I sit down to write a new project, I like to say that I need to write the first 50 pages or so of a project to see if the voice
Mm,
is lived in and interesting and workable and like I can hang a story off of it.
yeah.
And I tend not to do too much plotting in terms of narrative for those first 50 pages. I'm mostly trying to establish mood and atmosphere,
Hmm.
which are really important to me too, and that voice and character. And usually those first 50 pages are going to get substantially rewritten, but it gives me a sense also of pacing, like how fast does the story want to move? I can take a look at it and be like, oh, the story needs to move faster. Oh, I need to flesh this out. And so once I have that, I can really sit back and make a plan. I will tell you that when I wrote A Study in Charlotte, when I wrote my first mystery novel, I wrote it not letting myself decide which of my suspects was guilty because I was so afraid that the red herrings were going to be see-through. So I set it up so that any of them could have conceivably done it.
That's
And then
awesome.
at the end of the book, I picked one and then, of course, went back and justified the other's actions and all of that. But that was fun. I liked doing that.
No, that's amazing. I always do wonder with that kind of writing, like how writers do that. Similarly, like I am writing a love triangle, and in my first draft, I was like, I genuinely don't know who I want my main character to pick.
Well, that
You
means
know?
it's working, right?
Exactly, exactly. You wrote a book with Emily Henry, who is
Yes.
one of my favorite authors. I'm dying to know, what is the collaboration process when you work with another author? Is it more difficult, easier? What is that like?
I actually have another book coming out in June called Sunrise Nights with Jeff Zentner, who is another author who I just love, and I'm so
Oh,
excited
love him
to
too.
work
That's
with.
amazing.
Yeah, he's terrific. I love collaborating on a novel. What I have found is that in order for it to work, it needs to be an organic situation, I guess. It needs to be, how do I put this? The idea needs to be one that the two of you come up with together. So
Right.
it's really difficult to bring an idea that you have to somebody else and then try to
Mm.
fit them into it. And Emily Henry is one of my dearest friends, and we were touring quite a bit for our young adult novels. We debuted the same year. We were together all the time, and we would get into a car, and it would be like we had just each had like a triple shot espresso and like 9 hours wall to wall talking. We probably sounded like completely out of our gourds. Um, and we would just start plotting things. And I hadn't really had that relationship with a friend before where just being together felt generative in that
Right.
way. And
Mhm.
so, because we were lucky enough to see each other all the time, we developed the book that would become Hello Girls over the course of maybe a year and a half,
Mhm.
where we were just talking, talking, talking. And so we had lived in the world so much, the world just kind of existed whenever the two of us were together, that when we sat down to draft it, we drafted it in like a very feverish week. We rented a
Wow.
cabin up in northern Michigan, and I have all these pictures of Emily in her like fuzzy robe and her fuzzy socks with like her laptop, like grinding away. And yeah, we had the best time. She wrote one character, I wrote the other. They're both in close third perspective.
Awesome. Yeah.
Um, and then, when I was writing this book with Jeff Zentner, it's a novel in verse and conversation.
Oh, oh my
And
gosh, that's
so,
amazing. I'm so excited.
yeah, and I got to pull out my poetry background, which was so great. Jeff's a
Yeah.
wonderful poet too. So that was a little bit more correspondence based, where one of us would write a poem or a poem and a run of dialogue, and then we would send it to the next.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we bounced back and forth that
The idea of being in that cabin in Michigan where
way.
you're just concentrating on your world, that sounds like my kind of vacation. I
It
love
was
it.
a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So do you have any advice for teens who are on the fence about entering the awards, especially just for so many teens, it's that first time where you're putting your work out there in a really vulnerable, kind of scary way? How would you talk to teens about getting past that uncomfortable feeling of submitting your work and just going for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, that is a conversation I have with my students all the time now while they're submitting
Right.
to the awards. And I tell them a couple things. First of all, um, it is really good practice to start sending your work out as a high school student
Right.
because it gives you a sense of what it's going to be like sending your work out as an adult writer.
Yeah.
I still have an inbox full of responses to submissions all the time. That's just a part of my sort of like weekly life as a writer.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound a little bit, bear with me here.
Okay.
But one thing I tell them is I think it's really useful to start hearing no at a young age. Maybe
Yes.
you're going to send 7 or 8, pieces to Scholastic. And, you might have that sort of like bingo moment where all of them get recognition, but that's pretty rare. You're going to have certain pieces that will resonate. And I think it's really useful to start hearing no when you're younger because you realize that you can survive it and
Yes. Oh,
that your work is terrific and that it has worth despite what somebody else says. And then there's nothing like the feeling of sending that same work to maybe a different contest and having different pieces get recognized.
yeah.
You understand that, there is um, only so much control that you have over this whole process. The only thing you can control is your experience with the writing. The only thing that you can control is your experience with the piece. And one of the most important things, I think, is being able to let that piece go when it's ready to let it go.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with experiencing rejection young. I think I really felt that with acting as a young kid, being put in a creative kind of program, after school program, that maybe you didn't get the part you wanted, maybe, and just knowing that it is worth it for the sake of your art to submit, even though it's terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, to wrap up this first segment of this wonderful interview, could you tell us a little bit about what you're currently working on, or is that the novel and verse that you already kind of mentioned, or is there something else?
The novel in verse, I think, is going to be going out into advanced reader copies here pretty soon, which is so exciting. So that's Sunrise Nights. And
Okay,
then
I'll
Jeff
be
and I
looking
are
out
working.
for it.
Yeah, Jeff and I are working on a second project that's going to be coming out in 2025. And I'm also working on like a big secret project for adults that I'm really excited about, but I've been enjoying taking my time with it. So we'll see. I'm hoping to be able to send something to my agent in the new year. I love how I'm like hesitating even as I'm saying that out loud. Just fingers
Yep,
crossed.
that is the
Fingers
writer's way. Absolutely.
crossed.
Best of luck finishing both of those drafts. I am so excited. Hopefully, I can snag on NetGalley one of those arcs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Welcome to Hot Seat. This is the segment where we ask our guests a speed round of questions about life, creativity, and everything in between. What is your go-to beverage while writing?
Ooh, PG tips, English breakfast tea.
Do you write in silence or to music?
I write with noise canceling headphones on and no sound in them.
What's your favorite location to write?
I have a great desk set up with a banner above it that says, "I am trying to break your heart," like the Wilco song. And that is my motto whenever I sit down to write.
Do you have any quirky writing habits?
I have a croissant lamp that my friend gave me that's made of a real croissant.
Oh my
that
gosh.
has been like, I don't know how they preserved it, but I like to have my croissant light going when I'm writing.
Ebooks or physical books?
Physical books.
Fantasy or contemporary?
Oh.
I know.
Oh, it's so hard. In young adult fantasy for adult fiction, literary fiction.
Beach or mountains?
Mountains.
When writing, comfy sweatpants or a put together outfit?
Oh, sweatpants.
I figured. What is the best writing advice you have ever received?
Done is better than perfect.
Do you write in / annotate your books that you own, or do you like to keep them pristine and new?
I don't know if I keep them pristine. I don't tend to write in my books because to me that feels like I'm back in school. But I do dog-ear pages with abandon. So.
And last question, where can our audience find you? Do you have a website, social media, anything like that?
Yeah, come find me on Instagram at Brie Cavallaro. Or you can also go to my website, BrittanyCavallaro.com. At some point I will decide if I'm Brie or Brittany, but for now you can kind of find me across platforms.
Love it. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Brittany. This has been so fascinating and just encouraging to young writers everywhere. And it's so happy to learn all about your career and can't wait to read your next book.
Thank you so much.
Our final guest today is a 2022 Gold Medal Portfolio Award winner. This young artist winning portfolio explores the injustices against people of color and celebrates cultural values. She is currently a sophomore majoring in sculpture at Virginia Commonwealth University. Get ready for a fun and inspirational conversation with Shaeley Lincoln.
Hello, I'm majoring in sculpture at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I'm in my second year. The award has helped me to just understand like what I'm trying to create and my meaning behind my work. I do a lot of like reuse of material and just found objects. So it really helped me to enhance that.
Absolutely. So I'm so curious to learn more about sculpture. That's a really unique medium of art, not something that you hear about too much. What led you to sculpture work at such a young age?
So I went to a pretty rigorous art high school. Yeah, so that really led me to like just all of that we learned at a pretty early age, like how to make armatures, clay work, casting, and I kind of fell in love with all that and just the process in general.
Mhm.
And I like using my hands and just creating, and I feel like being able to take away and add to things is just something that I really enjoy.
Absolutely. Was there somebody in your personal life or your family that encouraged your art in any way?
Definitely my art teachers
Mhm.
in elementary school, middle school, high school. I feel like they've all been pretty encouraging.
Mhm.
Um, and some of my family too is like into artwork. I think my
Nice.
dad mostly, he has like a bunch of sculptures around his house, African mask on the wall. So it's just something that related to me, and people pushed me kind of towards that once they saw I was pretty decent.
Of course, yeah, and shout out to all of your art teachers. Art teachers are the best, and so much of what either makes or breaks a student to want to continue
Yeah,
their art or not.
yeah.
So that's fabulous. Can you walk me through the emotional experience of winning the award, what that felt like for you, finding out that you had won, all of that fun stuff?
At first, like I didn't know that I really got it. Like I was working for pretty much the whole year towards the ceremony and like the award. And once they had emailed me, like I was pretty shocked, but I kind of like had like a manifestation thing going on where I was like, I'm gonna get the award, I'm gonna win. And so I was like, oh, this actually happened. So it was really fun to go to the ceremony. Um, just do the Zoom calls and meet some of the other artists. It was
Mhm.
fun.
I love that you mentioned manifestation. I have not heard one person mention that so far, but it's so true. It's important to have that confidence really that like this is what you're meant to do and you're going to do it, which you
Yeah.
did. How do you balance your creative life with everything else you have going on? I mean, we know you're studying sculpture, which definitely helps, but
Mhm.
how do you kind of balance what you're doing, what you're making for school versus your own passion, or does it all fuse together?
I want to say it kind of fuses together. One thing that separates it is maybe like I like to vend and like do vending, so I like to sell a lot of my artwork. I do like crochet, making stickers, just a bunch of different things apart from like maybe the bigger pieces that I have to do. But it's just something that I really enjoyed, and like being in Richmond is pretty good with like just being able to sell stuff just
Nice.
the park or wherever. So I've
Yeah.
got really hooked to that creativeness, and then also fusing that sometimes with like my classwork.
Tell me a little bit about the themes that you like to concentrate on. We will have linked in the show notes for everyone to look at your sculptures. But for somebody who's not looking at it right now, can you kind of describe what you like to work on and how your identity kind of fuses with your art?
Yeah. So I like mixed media. So I like clay work, painting, adding just various different materials to kind of get the effect that I like. And a lot of the materials kind of take control of things, and that's just how I like to work.
Mhm.
But some of my meanings behind it have definitely been about Black women and just hair and being comfortable in that. And so a lot of my pieces are about, just feeling comfortable and taking what is trash and making it into something beautiful, because sometimes people, see curly hair and they think, it's kind of unprofessional, it's trashy. I've heard a bunch of different things, but I wanted to kind of take that and flip it just with like the trash and things that people don't want, and make that into something
Mhm.
that's nice. And I think now I'm more so focusing on like maybe aspects from like African art and architecture, and incorporating like more natural materials. So it's kind of like similar concepts, but doing a different thing now.
That is so creative, especially the taking quote unquote trash and making it something beautiful. Like that is something that so many people resonate with, and it must feel pretty empowering too, like when you finish a piece of art.
Yeah, and especially when people, they're like, this is really nice. Like, I kind of relate to this. It feels nice to be able to make something like that.
Absolutely. That's like the best part of art, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, what's your creative process like? Can you kind of walk us through what happens from a spark of an idea to the execution of the final product?
Yeah, so I just get random ideas like out of nowhere, and I usually just write them down in my notes. And I probably have like 100 different ideas right now of different things I want to make, and then I'll kind of add on to the idea if I see certain things or like, smell different things. It kind of affects like my process and like what I want to do. And then going into I just like to be experimentational, and just try new things. So usually I don't know what I'm doing
Mhm.
until until it happens. So sometimes, there are mistakes, but like I said, I kind of just let some of the materials like take control, and it actually comes out to be, like a nice a nice product.
Yeah, and that must also be the best feeling when you went in and are like, I don't know what's going to come from this, and it turns out to be something even better than you could have imagined, I imagine.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Um, so do you have any advice for someone on the fence about entering the awards? There are tons of teens out there who waver back and forth on whether they want to share their art with the rest of the world. What would you say to those teens?
I'd say definitely enter. Even if you don't win an award, it definitely helps to like practice writing about your artwork and making different connections between your art and even connections with other artists. So that's definitely important. And even, all the awards, you are getting recognition. So I feel like just getting your name out there and having people see your artwork and maybe say things about it and give you different ideas is helpful too. And of course, if you win the gold medal portfolio, you get the scholarship and even more recognition. So
Yep.
I just definitely say enter because I didn't really expect to win, but like I said, I try to manifest it, and it worked.
Did you feel any noticeable difference with the way that you felt about your art before you entered the awards and after?
Yeah. So I feel like some people didn't necessarily like my artwork, and they kind of shot down some of my ideas. So I was like, I don't know if this is really something that I even want to continue. But after the award, it kind of validated like my art and my processes and everything.
What are your goals for the future? Do you have any exciting plans for after graduation, or what do you dream of doing?
I do want to have my own gallery. I am applying for like an internship to be a part of a gallery and just kind of see how to curate different things and come up with different themes and things like that. I've been kind of interested in that, but I
Mhm.
also want to, continue making art, selling it. Um, I just have a bunch of different ideas about a whole bunch of different things.
Nice.
I
And
just
you
want
can
to
do
kind
them
of put that
all.
into action. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do them all, and I will be manifesting that future for you. Welcome to Hot Seat. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What time of day do you prefer making art?
Nighttime.
What is your dream exhibition venue for your work?
This is random, but maybe like a library or something.
What's your go-to snack while creating art?
This is not a snack, but maybe like chicken wings.
Hey,
Chicken wings.
that is a snack, and I love it. What is one art supply that you can't live without?
Clay.
Digital or traditional art?
Traditional.
Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Introvert.
Who do you turn to for creative advice?
Definitely teachers, my parents, maybe friends.
What season do you think you're most creative in?
The summer.
Do you like collaboration or independent work better?
Independent work.
Do you listen to music while working? And if so, what kind?
Yeah, I definitely listen to neo soul, R&B, hip hop.
If you could describe yourself in one word, what word would you use?
Silly.
I love that. What are you currently working on?
Right now, I'm working on a flower pot giraffe. It's like 7 feet tall.
Oh, whoa.
So yeah.
And our last final question is, where can people find you? Do you have a website or an Instagram or anything that people can kind of go and check out your art?
Yep, you can follow my Insta page. It's Shaeley's Art, or Shaeley's_art. And you can find me on there. All my stuff is on there. My website is on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shaeley. It's been so much fun talking to you, and best of luck with your art and your future.
Thank you. This was nice. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Hall Pass podcast. If you liked what you heard today, please do us a favor and leave us a review. Rate us 5 stars if you're feeling extra generous. Send this episode to a friend or a fellow creative who needs a little bit more inspiration in their life. Don't forget to follow us on social media like Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Art and Writing. Please reach out to us and connect if you're an alumni interested in sharing your Scholastic Awards story. We want to hear from you no matter your creative journey so far, and we want to make this show the best that it can possibly be. We'll be back next month with more interviews and inspiration. Thanks for supporting the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, and thanks for being a part of our community.